Some stories begin with bullets. This one begins with a smell. A U.S. Green Beret captain will spend the next hours trapped inside a kill zone he can't see. Then, after he survives the first shock, he'll discover something even worse than the ambush itself. The enemy didn't beat him with bigger weapons. They beat him by reading him like a signal. The only people who can save him are the men he mocked minutes before. This video is a historical documentary intended for educational purposes. May 23, 1969. Near the Cambodian border, South Vietnam. Rotor wash hammers the treetops. A Huey hovers low, chewing humid air into hot wind, dust, and shredded leaves. The jungle exhales wet heat like a living thing. Fuel stings the throat. Earth smells freshly bruised. The captain steps off the skid. Boots hit ground that feels half mud, half sponge. His team follows tight, disciplined, weapons ready, faces hard. Then he smells it. Not jungle. Not fuel. Something clean and sharp. Soap. Repellent. The chemical edge of standard issue, clinging to skin in a place that punishes anything unnatural. Across the clearing, just inside the Australian position, 4 SAS troopers stand in the shade like they belong to it. Uniforms dulled by grime until cloth matches bark. Faces smeared with mud in uneven patterns that break the human outline. Gear stripped down to essentials. Their rifles look wrong. Short barrels. No parade ground neatness. The kind of modification that makes an American armorer angry. One trooper wears rubber strapped to his feet, tie tread cut and tied like the jungle issued it. The captain can't help himself. He laughs, loud enough to carry. He says to his radio man, they are hacking up their own rifles. Idiots. The Australians don't react. No glare. No defense. One steps forward. An Australian sergeant. Lean. Quiet. Eyes that keep drifting toward the tree line, as if he's listening to something beyond human hearing. The captain squares his shoulders and meets him. He gestures toward the mud, the hacked rifles, the tire sandals. Your men look like they crawled out of a swamp. The sergeant leans closer, voice low and flat. No, mate. A pause. You smell like fear. The captain tries to turn it into a joke. I smell like hygiene. The sergeant's eyes flick toward the jungle. Enemy doesn't call it that, he says. They call it a warning. He lifts one finger, stopping the captain mid-thought. Listen. The jungle has a baseline sound when it's calm. Insects, birds, distant movement. Now it feels held. Not silent. Suspended. The sergeant whispers, that's what you never notice until it's too late. And the captain doesn't know it yet, but is already on a countdown to that radio call. The garage is a low shelter with a sweating tin roof and benches stained with oil and red dust. Lantern light throws hard shadows across tools laid out like ritual. The captain watches an Australian trooper clamp an L1A1 rifle in place. Then the trooper lifts a hacksaw. Teeth bite metal with a dry rasp that makes the captain's jaw tighten. The cut is deliberate. Controlled. Not panic. Not damage. The captain laughs again. What are you doing? Ruining your own weapon. The trooper doesn't look up. The sergeant answers instead. Making it fit. Fit what? The captain snaps. You just killed your range. The sergeant nods toward the jungle. How far can you see in there? The question annoys the captain because it's simple. He looks. The green wall swallows distance. 10 meters, he admits. 15, maybe. The sergeant nods once. Then your range was already cut, he says. By the jungle. The captain tries to regain ground. Speed matters. Momentum matters. We don't win by crawling. Standard, the sergeant replies, glancing at the captain's clean straps and treated webbing. Standard is predictable. The captain bristles. It's discipline. It's a signature, the sergeant says. So is smell. The captain's eyes narrow. You again. The sergeant's tone never changes. Because you keep carrying it. Then the sergeant steps toward the tree line. One step. Stop. He becomes still like a statue. His men copy him instantly, not as theater, but as practice. Seconds pass. The jungle sound dips. Then resumes. Insects return. A bird calls again, confident. Only then does the sergeant take another step. Stop. The captain realizes something uncomfortable. This isn't slowness. It's control. When you move fast, the sergeant says, barely above breath, the jungle never forgets you are there. Behind the captain, his radio man shifts. A faint clink of metal. The sergeant's eyes flick to it for half a second. And the captain feels the meaning of that glance like a warning shot. Because now he understands the Australian goal. Not to vanish. To avoid registering as a presence at all. A U.S. liaison officer arrives that week with a clipboard and a uniform that still holds its shape. His job is to observe Allied methods and report anything worth adopting. The moment his boots hit the ground at the Australian base, he feels the air. Wet canvas, old smoke, stagnant water, and a heavy, chosen jungle stink that shocks him because it feels deliberate, not accidental. He offers hygiene supplies to an Australian lieutenant, half concerned. The lieutenant refuses without hesitation. The smell isn't failure, the lieutenant says. It's a barrier. The liaison officer writes that down, more bothered by the certainty than the words. Over 3 days he notices patterns. First, the rifles. Short barrels. Stripped attachments. Tools used like doctrine. Second, the footwear. Tire rubber sandals. Soft step. Less crunch. Less track. Third, the language. Americans use contempt. Australians don't. An Australian casually calls the enemy Mr. Charles, and the liaison officer can't tell if it's respect or strategy. He writes it down anyway. He observes a patrol near the tree line. The movement is a ritual. Step, stop, wait. Stillness so complete it makes him uncomfortable. He finds himself holding his breath, as if any visible chest movement might betray them. He stands less than 20 meters away and realizes something that prickles his skin. He can't hear them. Not brush. Not leaf litter. Not gear. The jungle resumes its normal sound between movements, as if nothing unusual is happening. That's the key, operating below the threshold of detection. Back at his desk, he writes a report in plain language that feels almost dangerous. Clean American habits create scent trails. American pace creates noise signatures. Predictable routes create ambush geometry. He recommends field trials and changes. He stamps it. He submits it. And then it disappears. No debate. No argument. Just bureaucratic silence. When he asks where it went, a clerk shrugs. Classified. Why? The liaison officer asks. The clerk answers without emotion. Because it makes people look bad. The liaison officer steps outside and looks toward the jungle. He feels cold under the heat. Because he knows what happens when truth gets filed away in wartime. The jungle teaches it again. Soon. May 29, 1969. Dusk. A sector close enough to the border that maps feel like polite guesses. The captain checks his men. M16S. Clean and familiar. Regulation kit. A plan built around steady pace and confidence in support fire. The Australians trail in support, at distance. The captain doesn't like it, but accepts it. The jungle tightens as light drains away. Vines hang like curtains. Bamboo rises like spears. Shapes become human at the edge of vision. The captain moves the column forward. Boots press leaf litter that holds sound like paper. A strap squeaks. A metal buckle taps once. Small noises, but in this place small travels far. The captain keeps momentum. In his mind, stillness equals vulnerability. He doesn't see the Australians behind them. One step. Stop. Wait until insects resume. Wait until birds call again. Wait until the jungle forgets. The captain catches a vine on his sleeve. He yanks it free, irritated. The sound is tiny, but the jungle is a place where tiny becomes a message. He signals forward again, refusing to let rhythm die. Then the jungle shifts. A bird call cuts off mid-note. Not dramatic silence. Just interruption. The captain raises a fist. Everyone freezes. He listens. Nothing obvious. No voices. No footsteps. But the absence feels shaped, like a mouth closed around a secret. He lowers his fist and signals forward. 2 steps later, the first burst snaps from the left. Short. Hard. Controlled. Planned fire, not panic fire. The captain hits the ground, face to date, and the worst truth lands instantly. They weren't found by accident. They were expected. Men shout direction. Someone calls for smoke. The captain keys his radio and requests support. The enemy answers with disciplined angles, hitting where Americans cluster. The captain tries to build a perimeter. But every time he lifts his head to spot a shooter, he sees only green, trunk, shadow, firepower without eyes. And the sergeant's earlier sentence returns like a slap. You smell like fear. The captain grips the handset and forces command into his voice. We are pinned. Need immediate assistance. Then pride cracks. Get the Australians. Minutes stretch. The captain orders suppressive fire into likely positions. Muzzle flashes bloom and die under canopy. His men fight hard and do what they were trained to do. But the enemy doesn't behave like a target. It behaves like a system. Each time the Americans shift, fire adjusts. Each time they cluster, rounds punish the cluster. The captain tries to use sound and aggression to create control, but the jungle turns every shout into an announcement. He calls in supporting fire. Coordinates are guessed because he can't see what he needs to kill. The impacts shake the ground. Leaves rain down. And still the incoming fire doesn't stop. Because the enemy isn't standing in open ground. It's dug into oath and root in shadow, letting the Americans waste noise and ammunition. The captain feels the truth tightening around him, the wrong tool for the wrong environment. He tries to keep his voice steady, but he can hear fear changing the soundscape. Breathing louder. Hands fumbling. Radios squawking. Gear tapping. Men shifting because stillness is unbearable. Fear is not just panic. Fear is signal. He calls again for the Australians. The reply comes calm. Moving. The captain snaps, move faster. A pause. Then the Australian sergeant answers, calm enough to enrage him. If we move faster, we arrive loud. We need you here, the captain hisses. Another pause. We're not coming straight to you, the sergeant says. The captain's throat goes dry. What do you mean? The answer is quiet and final. We're going through them. The captain lies in the doubt, listening to the rhythm of gunfire, and realizes he is not waiting for reinforcements. He is waiting for something the enemy can't detect. Something that moves like the jungle itself. The captain wants a rescue that sounds like rescue. He wants rotor blades, shouted commands, boots crashing through brush, friendly firepower arriving like a wall. Anything loud enough to reassure the mind. But the Australian sergeant has already told him the truth. Loud gets you killed. So the captain does the one thing that feels like surrender. He orders his men to stop shouting. Stop wasting words. Stop moving unless they have to. He tries to make American discipline do what Australian discipline does naturally, become smaller. The jungle does not reward them immediately. Rounds still crack through leaves. Dirt spits up near elbows. A man a few meters away mutters a prayer through clenched teeth. The captain hears it and hates it, not because he mocks belief, but because it confirms what fear does to a unit. He keeps his head low, eyes scanning for anything that looks like a muzzle flash, a shadow shifting wrong, a patch of green that doesn't belong. Nothing. That's the torture of it. The enemy stays invisible, not because he's far away, but because he's positioned in the jungle's logic. Trenches. Root hollows camouflage that doesn't look like camouflage. The kind of preparation you don't notice until it's already killing you. The captain keys the radio again, voice reduced to a controlled whisper. Where are you? The sergeant answers as if he's standing right beside him. Close. How close? The captain demands. Close enough that they can't smell us, the sergeant says. The captain almost laughs at the absurdity, then stops. He remembers that clean chemical edge on his own skin. He remembers the sergeant's flat eyes. He remembers being told the enemy reads scent-like direction. He looks down at his forearm, at the treated fabric, at the darkened sweat line, and suddenly he feels exposed in a way armor can't fix. Minutes crawl. Then something changes, not in the American perimeter, but in the enemy's rhythm. The incoming fire pauses. Not a full stop. A hesitation. Like a drummer missing a beat. The captain's stomach tightens. That kind of pause can mean a shift. It can mean the enemy is repositioning for a closer strike. It can mean the enemy is about to finish the job. He forces himself to breathe slower. He thinks about what the Australians demonstrated. Step, stop, let the jungle reset. He can't do that here. All he can do is hold. If you're watching this and you're not subscribed, you're choosing ignorance on purpose. Subscribe now, or you'll miss the lesson that saves lives. And if you still won't subscribe, comment why. We'll read every reason. The radio hisses. The sergeant returns, quiet and precise. Hold for 10 more minutes. The captain whispers, 10 minutes is forever. Not in the jungle, the sergeant replies. In the jungle, 10 minutes is concealment. The captain swallows hard. He stares at the wall of green and waits for the moment the jungle reveals whose doctrine is real. The Australian sergeant's team does not come crashing toward the Americans. They don't cut a path. They don't charge. They don't announce their presence with heroic noise. Instead, they move as if the fight is not the center of the map, but the edge of it. They slide wide, using the gunfire as a curtain. Every burst, every shout, every crack of American return fire becomes cover for the one thing the Australians refuse to do: make a new sound that doesn't belong. The captain cannot see them. That is the first problem. The second problem is worse. He starts to doubt them. Because under pressure, the human brain wants proof. It wants to see help. It wants to hear it. It wants reinforcement that feels familiar. Australian help does not feel familiar. It feels like nothing. A man beside the captain whispers, "Are they even coming?" The captain doesn't answer, because he doesn't know how to explain a rescue built out of absence. He keys the radio, voice tight. "You said close. I don't see you." The sergeant answers immediately. That's the point. The captain's jaw clenches. "We're losing time." "You're losing signal," the sergeant replies. Signal. That word again, like the jungle is a radio field and every human habit is a broadcast. The captain wants to snap back. He wants to say the enemy is flesh and blood, not a machine. He wants to say courage matters. But then he notices something he didn't notice before. The enemy's fire is disciplined. It comes in bursts that punish movement. It doesn't waste ammunition. It does not panic. That kind of fire only happens when the enemy feels in control. And right now, control belongs to the side that can see and cannot be seen. The captain whispers into the handset, "What are you doing?" The sergeant's answer is a knife in the dark. "We're not coming to pull you out." A beat. "We're going to take their eyes." The captain's throat goes dry. He understands the idea, but not the method. He tries to picture 4 men slipping through a ring of shooters who have been preparing this trap for weeks. It seems impossible. And that impossibility is what makes it so dangerous. The sergeant speaks again, calmer than the captain deserves. "Stop your men from firing unless necessary," he says. "Let them think you're stuck." The captain almost laughs. "We are stuck." "Good," the sergeant replies. "Then you're believable." The captain stares into the leaves, listening to the enemy's rhythm, and realizes the Australians aren't reinforcing his perimeter. They are moving into the enemy's. And if the Australians fail, the ambush doesn't get worse. It gets final. Somewhere beyond the American line, the Australian patrol becomes a different kind of unit. Not a team in motion. A set of controlled interruptions. One step. Stop. The point man chooses ground that won't betray weight. Roots. Pack soil. Edges of stones. Places where leaf litter won't crunch. Places where a boot won't print a story. A pause long enough for insects to forget the disturbance. Another step. Stop. The sergeant watches the enemy without turning his head. He reads the small cues, a slight shift in shadow, a branch bent differently than the wind would bend it, the unnatural stillness of a patch of green that should be alive. He does not need to see faces. He needs to see attention. The enemy's attention is locked forward, toward the trapped Americans. That focus is a tunnel. That tunnel is a weakness. The Australians slide along its edge. They pass close enough to hear low voices. Close enough to smell tobacco. Close enough to notice a boot scrape and know exactly where it came from. They do not engage. Not yet. The sergeant knows the difference between courage and impatience. Engagement is loud. Loud becomes pursuit. Pursuit becomes detection. Instead, they aim for the brain, not the hands. They work their way toward where control would live, the positions that direct fire, the points that hold communication, the place where confidence sits. The sergeant reaches a shallow depression with a narrow view through layered leaves. Through that slit of visibility, he sees what the captain couldn't, a knot of activity that doesn't match the rest. Men moving with purpose. A position that feels central. He keys his radio once. Not to talk, to guide. His voice goes out in a low stream of coordinates and corrections, calm enough to sound like routine, precise enough to turn chaos into targeting. In the American perimeter, the captain hears the sergeant's tone and feels something shift inside him. It isn't relief. It's the realization that the Australians aren't helping. They are taking over. The enemy's rhythm stutters again. A burst cuts off early. Another starts from a new angle, uncertain. Then there's a silence that feels wrong, like a stage light dying mid-scene. The sergeant's voice returns. "Captain, move on my mark." The captain whispers, "What did you do?" The sergeant doesn't answer the question. "Mark," he says. A beat later, something happens in the jungle that the captain can't see, but can feel. Not an explosion you celebrate. A disruption. Like a hand squeezing the throat of the ambush. The enemy fire collapses in pieces, not all at once, but enough. A corridor opens where there was only death. The sergeant's voice hits the radio, sharp and final. "Now." The captain moves his men through the gap without asking for permission from pride. And as they run low through the green, he realizes the rescue did not arrive from the front. It arrived from inside. By first light, the shooting has faded into memory, but the jungle still feels like it's watching. The captain sits on a low log near the base perimeter, hands shaking slightly as adrenaline drains away. His uniform is no longer clean. It has finally matched the environment, and the irony makes him want to spit. Across from him, the Australian sergeant checks his weapon with slow movements. Not proud, not excited, just methodical, like survival is a job you do correctly or you don't do at all. The captain clears his throat. "I thought you were abandoning us," he admits. The sergeant doesn't look up. "That's because you think rescue is noise." The captain stays at the ground. He can still hear the enemy's disciplined bursts in his mind. He can still feel the helplessness of firing into leaves. A liaison officer arrives later with papers and a face that says he's seen this argument before. He carries fresh intelligence recovered from the field, enemy notes, directives, fragments of guidance passed between units. The captain reads a translated line and feels his stomach tighten. It isn't about Americans. It's about Australians. Avoid them when possible. Don't pursue. Don't initiate unless advantage is overwhelming. A phrase appears in the notes, repeated more than once. "Marung, Phantom of the Jungle." The captain looks up, stunned. They wrote this. The liaison officer nods. "They've adjusted," he says quietly. "They treat different allies as different problems." The captain's mind flashes back to the base, to the hacksaw, to the tire sandals, to the mud-smeared faces, to the calm refusal to rush. It wasn't theatrics. It was uncertainty turned into doctrine. The liaison officer adds, "They can predict our patterns. They can't predict theirs." The captain looks at the sergeant with a different kind of respect now, mixed with something heavier. Because he finally understands the most uncomfortable truth of all. The enemy didn't fear Australian firepower more. They feared Australian unreadability. The sergeant, as if reading the captain's thoughts, speaks without looking up. "It costs," he says. The captain frowns. "What costs?" The sergeant taps his temple lightly. "This," he says. "Stillness. Waiting. Being uncomfortable on purpose." He pauses. "Most men can't do it," he adds. "Not for long." The captain swallows, thinking about how easily his own team broadcast itself. And he wonders how many more units will learn this lesson the hard way. The captain writes his report in a room that smells like paper, sweat, and stale coffee. Fluorescent light hums overhead. A fan turns lazily, moving hot air in circles that don't cool anything. The base around him continues its routines, as if last night wasn't a razor's edge. He keeps the language simple because truth doesn't need decoration. He describes the Australian method without praising it like myth. Scent discipline. Noise control. Movement below detection thresholds. Route unpredictability. Patience as a tool. A weapon modified for the reality of 10 meters, not 400. He does not write heroism. He writes environment. Because last night proved that bravery alone doesn't cancel predictability. He slides the report across a desk to a staff officer whose expression is already defensive. The officer scans the first lines, then looks up with a familiar face of institutional discomfort. That's not standard procedure, the officer says. The captain holds his gaze. That's why we almost died, he replies. The officer's jaw tightens. He stamps the paper anyway, and the stamp sounds like a door shutting. Later, outside, the captain finds the Australian sergeant near the perimeter, checking gear again, as if nothing happened. The captain stops. He doesn't try to joke. He doesn't try to save face. I was wrong, he says. The sergeant finally looks up. Not smug. Not satisfied. Just steady. Good, the sergeant says. Now you can learn. The captain hesitates, then asks the question that has been burning since the first moment on the landing zone. What did you mean, he says, when you said I smelled like fear? The sergeant's reply is quiet enough to feel like it belongs to the jungle itself. You smelled like home, he says. And home doesn't live here. He nods toward the green wall, beyond the wire. In this place, the sergeant continues, fear isn't weakness. Fear is what you leak when you refuse to adapt. The captain swallows, feeling the lesson settle in his bones. Because the jungle doesn't care about manuals. It only cares about signals. And if you keep broadcasting the same ones, sooner or later, someone listens. Stay subscribed. Unseen mistakes repeat when people stop watching. If you won't subscribe, comment why. Be honest. The end.